Welcome to the Tech Connect podcast powered by PDi. This will be an ongoing series of informative information regarding technology and improvements in our industry. We'll be airing sessions the first Thursday of every month. Welcome back to our Tech Connect podcast, the third episode in our IPTV series. Today I'd like to welcome Helen Dahlgren, our Director of Pro Services. Helen, to bring those up to speed, or maybe those who haven't joined us yet, can you give us a quick definition of what IPTV is?
Sure. So IPTV is basically just distributing your television programming over a cat cable instead of over coax.
Awesome.
It's that simple.
So Helen, IPTV might be a great new buzzword to a lot of people, hopefully the people watching this podcast. But to us, it's been around for years, and you've been following these systems and you've been following the technologies. Can you tell us what makes today the right time to put these systems in?
Well, these days, the ability to do IPTV in the newer head ends is pretty standard. So depending on the input that you have with your signal coming into the TV, you can distribute it either way. So we've been working pretty closely with both DirecTV and with Blonder Tongue to use and make part of our solutions the hardware that they have out on the market now, and they're all capable of IPTV and a lot more in a much smaller space and very cost effectively.
So these are standard systems. They've been around for a while. They're not cutting edge, bleeding edge, let's say, where facilities are going to be the test and beta sites.
No, they're tried and true and tested, and we've spent years testing them here at PDi as well.
Wonderful. Help us understand some benefits of IPTV systems to healthcare facilities.
So the thing about IPTV is that obviously it's going to use a cat cable. A cat cable is less expensive, more flexible, and can be run longer distances in a facility, which makes it easier to install. And because of the distance you can run it, you can get perfect HD much further than you could with a standard coax. So it's sometimes in the facility's best interest to go with IPTV just to keep costs down, or to make it easier to go back and put the cat cable in after the fact, after the walls have already been put up. Then there is the smaller footprint, the new head ends for IPTV, and we have several kinds of solutions, are much, much smaller than a standard head end, and much smaller than using a bunch of analog receiver boxes from TV or from satellite, so that you can fit a head end basically into a 3 RU of a rack in a room or a closet, or even if you don't have a closet, in the corner of an office somewhere that's well ventilated, and you have an expert head end then, and the ability to do IPTV.
Awesome. Who should consider installing an IPTV system?
So there are a couple differences in facilities that look at IPTV. There are those who want to have a hands-free, remotely supportable solution for their facilities, and there are those facilities that already have a whole biomed or a whole IT department, and they're all experts in the security of those systems. So it used to be unheard of for facilities to give us access to remote into a head end even to support it. But now that's becoming more normalized, and the facilities are getting better at security. So anybody can consider putting a head end for IPTV in, but particularly those that have a smaller footprint, less room to work with in order to provide the biggest bang for the buck in terms of programming. And if you have long runs, if you have long hallways, long-term care, some hospitals, it makes it a lot easier to run those long distances and still have your HD signal. And if you're planning on installing a PoE infrastructure or other low voltage appliances in the patient rooms, if you're getting ready to remodel, you should plan to run the cat cable now, because you're going to need it in the future anyway. So if you run a a good cat cable that it can be future-proofing your facility for years to come.
So you mentioned security a couple times. Totally understand it. There's a lot of things going on in that space, but IPTV can be installed without going outside of the building. Is security still needed if you're just using it on your intranet as just a distribution type system?
No,
Okay.
absolutely not.
Great.
You don't have to. I don't have to be, as the installer, I don't have to be connected to your facility at all.
Correct.
It's just can be a huge benefit for somebody who has 500 or 1,000 TVs and has to make sure they're all up and running at one time. But this can be a completely standalone, with truly the only difference being the cable on which you're distributing the signal.
So you can be risk-free.
You can be risk-free.
Great.
And something else I would point out is that if you're even considering looking into IPTV, make sure you know who's providing your signal and what your options are there. And if you want, give us a call and we can work with you with the provider to make sure that what they can provide to you is compatible with the solutions that we offer.
So earlier in our podcast with John, he mentioned some of the pitfalls of coax, putting in new taps, splitters. Any advice on system balancing in IPTV? Do you want to leave a few extra ports on your switches, or do you want to max them all out and nobody really cares because you know it's going to be balanced?
Right. Well, it's always a good idea to have extra capacity because you never know if you're going to want to change a single into a double, or add a room that used to be an office and turn it into a patient room. So we would always suggest leaving something open on each floor at least.
10%, a couple. What's a good ballpark?
I would say I would leave maybe 4 extra ports on a floor. Yeah.
Okay.
And at some point, if you decide to go PoE, you may have to change your infrastructure or add other components to it. So you want to put it in places that are easy to get to and easy to work with.
So I was thinking, John mentioned some of the advantages over coax. From an installer's point of view, would you like to elaborate?
Well, if you consider the cost of coax, one roll of coax is going to cost you upwards, especially the solid copper core coax that will power our mounted TVs. It's going to cost you, $300 to $500 depending on the quality of the coax that you order. Whereas you can get a nice Cat 6A cable now for half of that, or maybe even less. And because it's so flexible, it's so much easier to run, to terminate, and as I've said before, you can get it a lot longer distances. So it just makes it a lot easier to install. Even if you've already got a cable installed, trying to put a small Cat cable in a tray going down the hallway is a lot easier than trying to fit a fat coax in there.
Speaking of running the cables, any difference in plenum rating? I know in coax there's a plenum rated cable. Typically it is even more expensive. How does CAT work in those sort of spaces?
The same way. Any area that you would normally use a plenum rated coax cable, you're still going to want to use a plenum rated CAT cable, and those are available. And we can sell you the CAT cable on our website as well, just to make sure that you get what you need, or you can get it from your own vendor.
Terminations pretty easy in the CAT world. Crimping connectors.
Right, you can. It's standard practice to always roll up a little cable and leave it, because at some point in time you're probably going to need to change the terminations on it. But when we do installations, we test the cables, we label the cables, we make it easy for the next person who's come along, and of course the terminations are a lot easier.
So if I'm a facility administrator and I decide I want to go IPTV, but I've got coax today, are you leaving the coax in place? Is it kind of a redundancy, or are you pulling CAT in and while you're pulling coax out, or what's the process?
So the people that we've talked to so far about IPTV solutions are still a little cautious because they haven't used IPTV before. So several of them have decided to keep the coax in as a backup for the time being, and that's a good plan too. If you don't think you're going to use coax in the future, then there's really no reason to have it unless you're using it to power the TVs.
Okay. So speaking of those people that may be on the fence or thinking about an IPTV but don't really know where to start, what would be your best words of encouragement to them about taking the leap?
I would say that we've been watching this come about for like the last 10 years now, and I think we're finally at a point where we understand your needs, we understand what you want to do, and we've got some solutions that are very cost effective and open up a lot of other possibilities for you, like Genio, like patient internet, like a more home experience for patients who are stuck in a hospital.
Helen, thank you for your time today and assisting us with the podcast and the benefits of IPTV, and appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us on Tech Connect.